The NBA Finals are over, and the Golden State Warriors just blew a 3-1 lead to the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James, something that had not been done ever in an NBA Finals. The Warriors came out absolutely hot that season and won 73 games, but they just didn't finish it off on the biggest stage, and that being the NBA Finals. After that shocking defeat, something else shocking would happen. The Golden State Warriors would sign Kevin Durant, and this shifted the balance of power so ever in their favor, making them the overwhelming favorites to win the 2016-2017 NBA title. A team that consisted of Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green was a team that nobody expected to lose. The only threat to this team it seemed to be was the defending champs themselves, the Cleveland Cavaliers, but like the rest of the NBA, they were totally outmatched. But there was another team in the West that presented a lot of issues for the Golden State Warriors, and that team was the San Antonio Spurs. This Spurs team was not slept on by any means. They had great expectations going into the 2016-2017 NBA season, and the Spurs did lose some quality vets like David West, Andre Miller, and Boris Diaw, but the Spurs would add an older Paul Gasol and a lot of young talent. And accompanying that, of course, were the longtime members of the organization, Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, who had championship pedigree and a ton of experience in the playoffs, as well as Kawhi Leonard, who won 2014 Finals MVP, and that will play a key role for this team going forward. With the greatest player of their organization retiring that year in Tim Duncan, it was expected that this team would take a huge hit on defense because Tim Duncan for years, even well past his prime, had been one of the league's best defenders. But it was now up to Kawhi Leonard to take over as the next superstar for this organization, and it was expected for him to win the Defensive Player of the Year in 2017 because he had won it in 2016, and that is how much defensive promise that Kawhi Leonard had up until that point, until this day. On opening night, this Spurs team will let the league know that they are not to be with, completely blowing the Warriors out by 29 points in a shocking upset victory, setting the potential blueprint for what was yet to come. At this point, the San Antonio Spurs have put a huge exclamation mark on themselves as a huge threat to the Golden State Warriors. Now, to take a deeper look into the roster of the Spurs, the two main stars of this team were LaMarcus Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard. I completely apologize if I didn't mention LaMarcus Aldridge early in the video. LaMarcus was a great piece for this Spurs team with a great shooting touch at the 4 or 5 and pretty good post offense as well. His defense was very effort driven and partly a product of his physical dimensions at the 4. He had long arms and great strength, which bothered most of his opponents. That season, LaMarcus Aldridge averaged 17.3 points per game, 1.2 blocks per game, 7.3 rebounds per game on 47% shooting from the field and 41% shooting from 3. As you can see, LaMarcus was putting up all-star numbers, and his production was valued each and every night for the Spurs team. Now for Kawhi, this really was one of his best statistical seasons. He averaged 25.5 points per game, 3.5 assists per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, on 48% shooting from the field and 38% shooting from 3. He also shot 88% from the free throw line, which is almost a 50-40-90 season, which is absolutely outstanding. Kawhi finished 4th in win shares with 13.6 and finished 6th in defensive win shares with 4.7 and played 74 of 82. The Spurs as a whole finished 2nd in the West with a 61-21 record behind Golden State and were also the 2nd rated defense in the NBA behind Golden State. And going into the playoffs, they had just as much leverage as the Golden State Warriors, having that 2nd seed. The Spurs in the first round would face the Memphis Grizzlies and would finish them off in 6 games. Then in the second round, they would run into the 3rd-seeded Houston Rockets team, which featured James Harden and his squad. And there weren't much expectations for this Rockets team. They were projected not to make the playoffs because they decided to part ways with Dwight Howard. But the excellence of James Harden willed them to the 3rd seed that year. But for the Houston Rockets in the second round, it was not pretty.
Here's Harden, Ginobili's on him. He's got a shot. What a play by Ginobili! Knocked it away! San Antonio wins in overtime.
Like the Spurs did to Memphis, they would beat the Rockets in 6 games. And in that final game 6, they finished the series off with a statement win, winning by 40 points without Kawhi Leonard, who was out with an ankle injury. This really was a testament to how great this Spurs team truly was. They beat a third-seeded Rockets team with the runner-up for MVP in convincing fashion. And in the elimination game, they blew the Rockets out without their best player on the court. Now, leading up to the Western Conference Finals, the Golden State Warriors were playing absolutely phenomenal basketball. At that point, they were 8-0, sweeping their round 1 and round 2 opponents. But in that game 1 of the Western Conference Finals between the Spurs and Golden State, the Spurs in the first quarter would go on a 14-2 run to close the first quarter, ending that quarter with a 30-16 lead. In the second quarter, the Spurs would hold Golden State without a field goal for 4 minutes after a layup by Matt Barnes to open the second quarter, at which this point the lead was 44-19, and Kawhi was absolutely firing on all cylinders. But unfortunately, as we all know, he had ankle problems leading up to this point, and Zaza Pachulia in this game would undercut Kawhi, injuring him, disabling him for the rest of the series. As a result, the Warriors would rally and come back from a 25-point deficit and ultimately sweeping that series. 26 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. This was the stat line of Kawhi Leonard in just 2 quarters played. The Spurs were plus 21 in 24 minutes with Kawhi on the floor against the heavily favored Golden State, and minus 85 in 168 minutes without him. That is completely insane. To say that the Spurs would have defeated the Golden State Warriors in that series is a big stretch. Without Kawhi, they simply just got outgunned, and that's simply what it would have went down to if Kawhi Leonard was healthy in this series. The Warriors were the best offensive and defensive team, so to determine the rest of this series by 1 game is completely absurd. The Spurs would have been a tough out with Kawhi on the court, but because he wasn't, there was no major threat on the court, and the Warriors simply took advantage of that weakness. The Warriors would have finished that series in 5 games, but realistically, they probably would have finished that series in 6 games. But that's taking nothing away from the Spurs. A fully healthy Spurs team really challenged the Golden State Warriors, and they will always be remembered as one of the most threatening teams to the Warriors dynasty, simply because they measured up. But in the comments, you let me know if you think that the Spurs would have beaten the Golden State Warriors. And that's pretty much it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you for watching.